All right. Something. We'll call the November meeting of the Economic Development UW Extension meeting to order. Madam Clerk, we do roll call.
James Schlender,
Just here.
Tom Duffy,
Here.
Jesse Betcher,
Here.
Brian Bissonette, Stacy Hessel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Madam Clerk, are we in compliance with open meeting laws?
The meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Committee members have seen the agendas posted. Is there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, moving on to number 5, public comment. I have one person that's submitted to speak for informational purposes only, Ms. Zilmer. Someone want to slide over so she gets access to it?
Absolutely. Zilmer, Edgewater, property owner and taxpayer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Wisconsin. And I sent out hurriedly an email this morning, so I apologize in advance for all the typos and grammatical errors, but I did want to get some information in front of this committee, as each committee is going to be discussing their budgets before the full county board decides on what will be funded for how much. I know the library is not part of this budget, but it is, I think, supports education and community development. I think it would be helpful for both the library and the Tourism Bureau to have more than just a few years of historical information. I know Mike Keefe has pulled that together in the past for you. And it kind of shows the trends of funding up and down over the years, and I think that's more meaningful. I do want to speak to the tough decision on funding the Hayward Lakes Area Visitors and Convention Bureau. Starting in about 2016, the Wisconsin Department of Revenue started reporting on room tax collections, where previously they didn't even collect it. They weren't able to report on it at all. And I think if anyone goes to that site and they see the amounts that these towns are collecting and who they're remitting to, we have not just one entity, but we have multiple entities that are marketing this area. And I learned a lot at the small town forum last week that was facilitated and coordinated by the Sawyer County LCO Economic Development Corporation. I think it was very valuable for the Hayward community members. And I thought one thing that was interesting was that they had a representative from the bid speaking and talking about the kiosk project, and that they also found at the end of the year they had extra money left that they needed to spend. One of the things I heard as an added expense on the Hayward Lakes Area Visitors and Convention Bureau side was the increased public flow and use of facilities there because of the kiosk. So I'm just thinking that with all these other entities that are helping market the area and then creating extra cost, and with knowing that the county in the past had always been encouraging the VCB to become independent, that now is a time to start, returning to the reduction in funding despite the valuable service. And I know Sherry was at this year's attempt in Edgewater to try and enact a room tax. And I think it was very meaningful that the business owners there said, if we don't support these marketing efforts through our own dues, subscriptions, and ads, why would we ask taxpayer or the other businesses to be taxed to do that? So just something to consider in light of all the other discussion that you had. Thank you.
Anybody else here that's not on the agenda that wishes to address the on to number 6. The minutes from last month's meeting have been made available. Mr. Duffy.
I'll second.
Second. I have a motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Betcher, to approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Number 7, Surrey County Agricultural Fair Association report. Anybody here from the fair? Anybody from the fair? Moving on to University of Wisconsin Extension Department report from Miss Baltrus.
Sis.
So good morning, and I just wanted to quickly update you on the 4-H and youth development position. So Sky Holt's position, she left in July. We do have things moving forward as of Friday, so I wanted to just update you with where I landed with putting a few things in the position description, so you're aware of that. Based on the visioning session that we held and some input that I did receive. So some of the key points will be facilitating school-based, after-school, and community-based 4-H programming, recruiting, developing, and managing volunteers to create year-round learning, and cultivating collaborative efforts and partnerships with other organizations that expand development. There's a lot more to it, but in general, those big 3 bullet points. And I will be hopefully posting this week. Required qualifications will be a bachelor's degree, at least 2 years of relevant field and work experience, communicating effectively, experience recruiting and supervising volunteers, as well as those strong interpersonal skills. So again, several bullet points for all that, but we do required qualifications and then preferred qualifications. And then move to a search and screen committee. So I need input from this committee. If anyone prefers to be on that committee when we get to the interviews. In the past, there has been opportunities for at least 1 or 2 people from this committee to be involved in that process. So I wanted to offer that. You certainly do not have to be, but if you want to be, I want to honor that and make sure you're kept in the loop with how we're moving forward.
Any questions for Ms. Baltrus? Hearing none. Anything else for your report?
No, I'll spare you more unless if anyone wants to be involved, let me know.
Thank you. Moving on to number 9, Hayward Lakes Visitors and Convention Bureau. Respect.
My executive asked me to, just give you guys that letter, which you got a couple weeks ago. Good news, I'm going to La Crosse this week because we've been nominated for Outstanding Marketing Initiative through Destinations Wisconsin. So I will be down there, hopefully receiving an award. The other thing, if I can address the public comments?
Public comments, but if you have information you want to share, it's.
What?
I don't know about public comments, but if there's anything that you want to discuss with the board, that's.
I was invited down to the town of Edgewater to talk about room tax. Hayward Lakes is not going to receive any of those funds. It was going to benefit the Chamber of Commerce or the Birchwood Area Chamber of Commerce, but we were just there to explain how the funding worked. So I just wanted you to know that the funds were not coming to the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau. So that's my report.
Any questions? Ms. Ziller?
Thank you. I think where we left it with the town board, it's a town board decision how to split it like some of the other towns do. And I think if the board had voted to go forward with room tax, they would have probably made a decision to, maybe split between Hayward Lakes and the Birchwood. One.
Yeah, but Hayward Lakes didn't ask for
All right,
any of
that's
that
just-
funding.
Thank you. But it's just an option for towns. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Beckman? Hearing none, thank you for your report. Number 10, Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Hey, good morning, everybody. In your packet, you had a proposed contract for administrative services for the housing rehabilitation program. So I'm just here to address any questions if there are any for that contract.
All right, so that's actually item B. So item A, is there anything on the report from the snapshot regarding the quarter 3 revolving?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at an old agenda. I apologize.
That's fine. Do you have any information regarding that?
I don't. I was texting Ken Pearson, who was hoping to be on the call, but he was on another call. So it was just a summary report more than anything else for y'all.
Is there any questions from the committee on the report? Moving on to item B, the agreement between Northwest Regional and Sawyer County. So this is Sawyer County that needs to sign this?
Right. So back in the late 2000s, Sawyer County submitted an application to the Department of Administration, Department of Commerce, probably back then, to receive federal funds to assist in low to moderate income housing rehabilitation. That pool of funds is housed within Sawyer County in a separate checking account. We have been administering that program. There were predecessors of us who were administering in the past as well. But what it is it's a pool of funds that eligible recipients can apply to and receive assistance for rehabilitation to their house. Primarily, it's targeted towards persons 80% or below county median income based on household size to do or to assist in major rehabilitation of maintenance things that people just can't afford to do or haven't had the ability to do, deferred maintenance primarily. So we're talking replacing windows, furnaces, roofs, siding, electrical upgrades, plumbing upgrades, whatever those improvement needs are in those homes. So that's the purpose of the program funding. We've been administering that on your behalf for almost 10 years now, and even before that. It is a project that has no net financial impact to the county. It's federal dollars that were received from the state, passed to the units of governments, and that pool of funds is available as needed by applications.
So if we didn't agree to this, then what would happen with that account?
It would remain in place, and then you would have to go out and do a request for proposals for administrators of that program. Or the other alternative is you can return the funds to the state of Wisconsin. There's a procedure for that as well.
Is there any questions for Sheldon regarding this proposed agreement? So does the committee approve this, or does the committee send this up to the full board for consideration?
And send it to the board.
All right, so at this time, we'll consider a motion from the committee on the request from Mr. Johnson. Do what?
Move it to the full county board.
Oh, go ahead.
Have a second from somebody. From Ms. Hessel.
Thank you.
Motion is to send this agreement on. Do we have a recommendation? So we have a motion to send this agreement up to the full board with the recommendation that it be signed. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, Sheldon.
Mr. Pearson is now on the line if you want to just
Yeah, hello. Can you all hear me this morning?
from A, letter A.
Boy, can we ever.
All right, good deal. I'm glad my Bluetooth headset's working. Thank you all for having us this morning. I don't have a whole lot to report, but I did send out our quarterly loan activity. The loan activity for this last quarter wasn't as active as the last report, mostly because of that great Main Street Bounce Back Grant program that was available for many of the businesses in Sawyer County and LCO tribe. So I think once all that money once all the businesses who applied get approval, that's handled by a different department in Het Regional Planning outside of the lending department, and I know they're doing a great job. But once all that is approved and we get through the next cache of funds, my guess is that the lending will start picking up again. There are a couple big projects in Sawyer County that are in my pipeline, but they haven't really moved forward yet. So they're on the radar, but nothing's really been happening with them yet. So we'll see where they end up. And that's all I have to report today.
Any questions for Mr. Pearson? Mr. Pearson, thank you for your attendance.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Moving on to number 11, Economic Development Corporation report. Mr. Gardner.
Well, I submitted kind of a perspective on what we've been doing in the last year. Most of I've already reported at this committee. I won't go through that. I'd answer any questions that you might have. Just a couple quick things. We hosted a couple of public events last week, both well attended. The small community forum brought 8 or so resource agencies to town to hear about our work in the community, and I've had really good follow-up both from the participants and the agencies, and I believe some significant connections are going to be made and some outcomes will be following. We hosted the Business After 5 Chamber event at Backroads Coffee on Thursday, and it was the best attended of any of them by the chamber this year. But just that, I really had an opportunity to meet a number of young, talented people that grew up in Hayward, were educated here, got some skills elsewhere, and have brought their families back here. And it was really a lot more young people at the event than I've seen all year long. But that, just sort of underscores some of the work that Lori mentioned that could be ensuing with that position and working with the school districts and stuff. I think retaining talent is going to be an important thing moving forward. In the forest products industry, there is legislation under consideration for the mills in Wisconsin Rapids and Park Falls, and tracking that and communicating with Representative Krug's office on that. Also, there is the Rural Economic Diversification Strategy that will affect the forest industry that's underway. We're monitoring that and participating. I'm assisting the Minot Commute the launch of the Minot Commute process. A big challenge always is to get the funding to make things happen, but you really have to be hands-on and making sure things are launched successfully. Still working with a couple businesses on the Main Street Bounce Back grant program, and we're tracking closely. That's something that's going to come out hopefully from the Department of Administration in Wisconsin the next couple of days, called a Diverse Business Assistance Grant Program, which is, by its press release, custom made for the work that the Economic Development Corporation does, and technical assistance to small businesses. And we have the qualified, well, all the details aren't, but we have the qualified census tracts, I believe, that they're targeting. Hope to be having good news on that.
Any questions for Mr. Gardner? Mr. Betcher?
Yeah, you said you hosted the Business After 5. What does that mean? You hosted it.
Well, the chamber monthly through most of the year has Business After 5
Yeah,
events.
I'm aware of what it is, and I'm aware that it's a chamber function. So when you said that you hosted it, can you be more specific as how you hosted it?
Every month they have it at different businesses, and that business is the host of the event. In this particular instance, we did Backroads Coffee, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Wine Cave all kind of collaborated to host that event at Backroads last Thursday.
You pay for the hors d'oeuvres, the
Right.
gift
Yeah.
cards, everything else.
Put up prizes and stuff, the host businesses.
Okay,
do.
so it was hosted by 3 entities.
It was
and you were
this
one of
time,
the
yeah.
3. Okay, all right, thanks for clarifying.
Any other questions for Mr. Gardner? Hearing none, thank you for your report. Moving on, number 12. Motorized trail and non-motorized trail report.
Good morning.
Mr. Marowczak.
October in the past has generally been a shoulder season. We're slow in that, but it hasn't been for the ATVs. As I've been saying all summer long, it's been very busy for the ATV traffic here in October. Last week, or over a week ago, I attended the State Snowmobile Association, AWSC, down in Wisconsin Dells. We had a workshop there for the meeting. Had over 800 people attended that meeting down there and workshop. So it was a huge turnout, went very well. At that meeting, we invited them up to Hayward. So in January, Sawyer County will be hosting the AWSC at Flat Creek. So we've got people from throughout Wisconsin. There's 2 representatives from each county that are involved with the AWSC. They will be coming up to Sawyer County here in January for our January meeting up here, and then we'll hopefully be doing a snowmobile ride. So,
Any questions for Mr. Marowczak?
Why aren't you inviting all 800 people up here?
yeah,
Why these 2?
we can't handle that many people up here. Not at one time.
Selling our coming short, but I think we could handle it.
Lodging?
Yep. Stay at your house.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. All right, so we have an email that Mr. Duffy's provided from Mr. Pop on the updates of the Birkebeiner and log rolling world championships. Anybody have any questions about that? Did everyone receive it? Okay. No questions?
Is there I have one question, because he mentions that they already tore the seats out.
Right.
And they're relying on, cargo ships from China, I guess, for the new seats. So is there a plan B if those don't arrive?
So there's a plan B, they're going to use aluminum seats. First of all, if they can't get them, they'll go to wood.
Okay.
The seats, they're on the bleachers now are old, over 20 years.
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
They've had some accidents there, people falling through. It was time to replace them. So thank God the Berkey has the money and he'll do that and fund that themselves. They're on track now to have about 12,000 skiers again this year. And they've added a new event again. I think we mentioned it earlier, but they're going to have an open track on Wednesday, which means you have about an hour to start. So people can pick their own start time. There are fewer people and you still finish on the main street. And as far as the Hayward businesses are concerned, it's another day of all these skiers on the main street. So that's a great event. And they just completed now the solar power at 00 and at the office. So the office now is totally on solar. And at 00, they'll have those buildings on solar and the trail lights also on solar. So that's kind of a nice message to send to the community as far as clean air and clean power is concerned. So that's kind of what we have. We look now for snow.
That's nested.
Yeah.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to number 13, 2022 budget discussion. All right, so we had an eventful meeting at the public hearing on the budget presentation. And the takeaway from that is $42 million budget, now we're fighting for 40,000 bucks. So this committee is the committee of jurisdiction for the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau. The proposed budget proposal for them was 10,000. They submitted for 50,000. There was a motion to increase it back to 50,000. And it's kind of the responsibility of the committee, or not the committee, but the board, to balance that because there's no additional funding that's available to fund that. So, Mr. Hoff, do you want to provide a little bit more information regarding that? Or at least the process?
Yeah, so, the board will need to either find additional revenue source or reduce some other service if they intend to keep the $40,000 additional contribution to the Visitors Bureau. And I can help with that if you have thoughts or ideas you're contemplating.
Ms. McCoy had a excited idea that I wasn't able to track too much. It was something about the capital improvement grant or capital improvement fund and switching that because it is capital. The capital is considered outside the levy. Transferring that out is 139,000.
Yeah, the board authorized 1.3 million in debt, which we then applied to the state for that loan. So that's a process that is underway. So if you're going to change that amount, that may delay that process. Certainly could be done, or we could do alternative funding from a different source. That's an option. That would increase the tax rate because that would add additional debt service. So that is an option.
So that she was correctly with that, whatever that capital line was.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, there is some IT stuff in the budget. But I think that was an additional request that came in late, so wasn't included in the 1.3 million. So that's an option. We could use ARPA funds to support tourism. So we could use some of the ARPA funds, but that would be like a one-time contribution. We couldn't do that, fund that forever. So if your intent is to have the $50,000 in the budget going forward, I think we would want to find, something within the levy limits that can accommodate that. It could be used to balance the budget this year, because we've got everything else in order. So that's another option. reducing services in some other capacity is another option.
So Ms. Beckman, this is the committee of jurisdiction, so as much as we can as committee members, you heard us take up the issue with the funding that you have for your entity, which, you know, we heard your arguments, we heard your position. If we take these steps that are being offered, we increase the debt load, we tap into one-time funds for ARPA. I guess one of the things that would make it easier for us to make this argument would be is what do you have an idea of what next year's budget proposal would be?
Well, I mean, that's, that's the game we're playing here because I don't have, you know, a town of Bass Lake haven't received any money yet. I don't have a signed contract yet with the town of Brown Lake. So I mean, we can guess, but.
So if we did a proffer of, say, if we did 40,000, increased it by 40,000 to 50 this time, is there a way that you could be able to work with a smaller budget amount next year?
You can always work with, if you have to work with a smaller budget, we can make it happen, yes. That's the question, yes.
Any other comments on this, Mr. Betcher?
Yeah, so Mr. Hoff, you mentioned twice about reducing other services in some capacity. Is there anything that from this committee that comes to mind where we could maybe trim a little fat to help out? Maybe not the full 40, but maybe, you know, 5 or 10,000.
You know, the other things within the jurisdiction of this committee, you know, the fair, they've, you know, we're funding that to their request extension. That's, you know, the staffing. So that's a contract that's pretty much the way it is, unless you didn't fill that open position. But it's recommended that we do for those purposes that Lori outlined. Northwest Regional Planning obviously is a statutory calculation there. Economic development, you know, that's 25,000. I would recommend that we fund that with the suggestion of matching grants from other sources. So within, you know, within the items under your jurisdiction, I don't see it. You know, obviously as a county board, you can look at other, you know, any other service as well, because I mean, this increase is under this jurisdiction, but to balance it, you're going to have to, you know, contemplate services countywide. So it's not inappropriate for you to, you know, look to other sources other than just what's here, because when you get together as a whole board, that's going to what it's going to come down to.
So hold on. Here's what I need the committee members to understand. We have looked at what our committees, what our entities that were responsible that report to us have shared with us. And so the rest of the board doesn't have the information or access to information that we have. And so I appreciate the discussion about seeing if we could draw something from what's already in place. And so rather than watching everyone else turn pale in the room, I have to really make sure that we understand that it's our position to not only try to raise this 40, but also protect what we have that's coming in, because everything else is, we have a really tight budget, really tight budget. So the fair is, I don't want to say it's off limits, but there's been a lot of work that's been put into to try to make sure that this was a viable entity. UW Extension is a negotiated contract. And so if we do that, we have to reopen up negotiations. And this is a year-long planning event. Hayward Lakes is already up under discussion. Northwest Regional Planning, even though they have always been questioned by people not on this committee about what their purpose is, there's a statutory obligation, and then there's also a financial contribution that they make back. So I mean, we need to know these arguments so that when we go back in there and they say, well, if you want 40,000, you need to get 40,000 from your own committee. That's not a fair charge that we have. We need to protect what we have and then try to raise this money coming out of that. Economic Development Corporation, this has always been the hot button item because it's a $25,000 allocation that over the years has been promised that they would end up being self-sufficient. And that hasn't always been the case. And there's a lot of reasons why that's not been the case. And so the thing that we got to make sure that is we put that on the table, that's a match. So if we reduce that by whatever amount is, that's actually a double impact on that committee, on that entity, because then we're alleviating or we are removing the obligation of the full match from another entity. And so just be conscious of what that impact is. Motorized trail and non-trail, we don't have a contribution on that, right? So we could shake them down for some money. So I'm going to go to Ms. Hessel first, and then Ms. Honorine will, once the committee has a chance to speak, then I'll give you an opportunity to talk.
When you say a match, are you talking about the LCO donation?
I think it's the LCO does something, is that?
They do
someone-
15,000, we do 25.
All right,
It's all,
well, Mr. Hoff,
That is correct.
so we do fit, they don't do a full match?
No,
Any other, Mr. Betcher?
So if, the question on that, if we reduced it from 25 to 15, would it then be, would they still get the 15 from LCO? Or wherever they're getting that match from?
Yeah, I don't know what their process is for allocating, the amount that they do. But I think you also, proceed to get funds from other businesses and whatnot.
We do fundraising within the community with the financial institutions and businesses. To date, that's been 13,000 plus that we've taken in, and we're, pursue grants as well.
So between LCO and the business contributions, we get that match of
That would certainly more than compensate for any match, but that's not where we leave it. The grants things, it's finding the right thing to fit. We participated in a lot of grants with other people. I'm anticipating that as the many cascading opportunities have come down, that we're just getting there.
I'm going to give Mr. Duffy.
At the full board meeting, Mr. Olson, I think, suggested that, Sharon, you mentioned you take 35,000, you'd be happy with. Is that right, or is he mistaken?
So he called me and he said, what would be the minimum? And what I said was, I think half would be reasonable, 50%, 25,000. So I don't know where he got the 35,000.
Well, right now we have a motion from the board to fund you at 50,000. And so that's kind of our obligation until we have a chance to have another motion for that consideration. So Ms. Hessel,
I think he was next.
Mr. Honorine, and then Ms. Fitch. Mr. Honorine?
One,
Go ahead, I didn't know if you're.
one question I have, and again, not being on this committee or involved with all, but the increase in the 0.5% sales tax over the last couple of years, like say what's collected in this coming year, does that give you money to work with your budget for 2023? I'm saying, how does that actually work? Now, the money, let's say that you collected, and according to the article in the paper, going to live as a substantial increase in that sales tax. So does that go into general fund? And how do you earmark where that extra money or that income actually goes? You just spread it out and use it as was, like, for instance, last year, you had X number, you can't spend money you don't have. So what I'm saying is, whatever the county will receive next year in 2022, I'm guessing would go or could be earmarked for 2023. Is that the way that usually works?
So I'm going to defer that to Mr. Hoff because I don't think it's a simple, we collect it and then get to spend it kind of mechanism, because the state of Wisconsin, similar to the mafia, is going to want their cut. And that's not the same amount that's going to be coming back as what's being reported. So Mr. Hoff.
Yeah, the 0.5% county sales tax is in the budget that we receive, a little over $2 million in sales tax annually. Fortunately, that we've had a couple of good years here recently, and that's helped our budget tremendously. But as you recall, our net new construction for the levy limits, we get about $80,000 additional a year to spend. To fund, the cost of living increases for employees, that's over 300,000. We had a 5.5% increase in health insurance. That was, almost another 100,000. So our $80,000 doesn't go too far. So all of our revenue sources, including taxes, sales tax revenue, forestry revenue, federal and state grants and whatnot, user fees, all those things go into the bucket to fund county operations. So yeah, there's an increase in sales tax that funds county operations, like salary increases.
Yeah, I'm sure it disappears real fast. I mean, because.
Well, it gets used. It
All
doesn't
the increases of
disappear. It
everything
is
else.
used to fund county services. So, and sales tax can fluctuate. Forestry revenue can fluctuate. So even in the budget, we've got a number projected that we'll receive next year. Will it be higher? We hope so. Eventually the economy's not going to support, that level of sales tax. So we don't want to overextend ourselves. So, there's not fat in the budget, but we're conservative in some of those revenue projections so that, we don't go in the hole, because there's no way to make that up if we don't hit those numbers. But yeah, the sales tax is used in the budget.
Yeah. One thing I could promise this committee, like, as probably a lot of you know, I do quite a few sports shows for our organization promoting this area, and I'll work my fanny off to bring as many people here in 2022 as we possibly can. So again, that sales tax says is that we do get hopefully increases each year. The only other thing, just a thought, and again, I know not to get into ambulance transfers and stuff, but that's another way of course, getting income. And, there's maybe some possible ideas that I have, which I can talk to Nate about, that might generate some more fun there for the following year. So but the other thought I had is any of the fees that are charged for permits in the county, where the county will receive that money. I don't care if it's it's a building permit, electrical permit, anything that would come back to the county. Have you thought about raising those, or have those fees ever been increased? 1%, 2%?
So let me put this out so that we don't reinvent the entire wheel for what we're trying to accomplish. Your suggestions are welcome. And I'm going to tell you that every avenue that you've talked about has been debated. When we talked about putting a fee on the trails and licensing and different things, some of those things are not in our authority. You've heard, Northwest Regional Planning is a statutory requirement for funding. UW Extension, that's a contract negotiation, and so. What our issue is that we need to raise 40,000, but what we can't go back into is change the mechanism on what we have the $42 million, which is why we make the comment, or at least I make the comment, that we passed $42 million and we're going to fight over 40 grand. It's because this budget is really tight. Our budget has been tight every year, and unfortunately, fortunately, but unfortunately, when we get articles that was published in the Surrey County Record, it gives a false sense of security in terms of the revenue coming in, because we've been operating under a deficit probably since 2004. And it has to do with a lot of things that are outside the control of what the county is. We're being a subdivision of the state of Wisconsin. And so when there's money that comes in, it's not new money that's coming in. It's actually probably covering different services that have been provided before that we didn't have to cut from something else in the past. And so it's a relief, but it's not new money on the table for us to start re-examining. If we start talking about changing up ambulance, that's outside of our jurisdiction, and then that's the ambulance service is actually outside of the levy limit. That's a whole different funding mechanism that comes into play. So then when we start talking about we had that, well, Mr. Duffy can speak to probably even better than we can, but there was a year there where we had some county board members that wanted to assess a trails tax, which creates then a detriment. It has a unintended consequence where we think that we're gonna have the same amount of people coming in, and then all of a sudden we can just get $15 from them for using the trail. And that turns into a political nightmare, because then, you know, there's just other things. And so I appreciate the analysis that you're offering. I have to just remind, not just you, but everybody else, that sometimes the media is a great source of information, and sometimes it's a misleading source of information. And so what we really need to do is focus on kind of what the recommendations were for Mr. Hoff, and then get ready for, the committee needs to get ready for when we meet again, probably, was it next Tuesday?
Yeah.
For the push for the 40,000. So any questions about that? Ms. Hessel?
So I would like to propose a motion, or I would like to make a motion, sorry, it's Monday, that we use the ARPA funds to cover this 40,000, giving everybody more time to figure out what we can do for next year. And so that's what their intended use is. We know that for a fact, that it's intended to be used for tourism. So that's a no-brainer. We could just use that and save everybody that's fighting over the $40,000 right now, and then just focus next year and be more conservative next year.
So I have a motion from Ms. Hessel to recommend to the full board that ARPA funds be used to cover the deficit that was created with the motion for 40,000. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All right. In discussion, that's the easiest path, and we're going to hear a wall of screams, because the reason ARPA was kind of being used to offset the borrowing that was going to be happening for the second courtroom construction. And so I agree with your motion. I agree with the intent of what you're doing. We here need to be ready for that discussion when it comes, because there's other committees that are waiting for their opportunity to stick their ladle into that pool to help offset some of their concerns. And so we just have to be ready. So if you got any favors or any friends with anybody else, we need to, that's how save bills and sausages. You know, you never want to know.
We already took care of broadband, so we're okay there.
Okay. So, all right. Any other discussion on the motion? Any other comments regarding the topic?
I don't think that the chances of that passing aren't very good.
Right.
So I think we have to really be aware of it. What's our plan B?
Yeah,
In the event that doesn't go.
well, I think you're gonna donate it. That's the plan B.
Yeah.
I think
We all support the idea, you know, but
I think that the rest of the board might be looking to this committee, though, since we do have the jurisdiction over Hayward Lakes Visitor Center, that is getting that 40,000. So I think that we might be looked to come up with a solution to offset that. So I think that this is a potential solution, something that we can offer up to the board. And if it fails miserably, as much as it might be frowned upon, I think we could look at taking a little bit from the economic development, you know. I know that there's a motion in a second right now, so I don't know if I can discuss that, but I just think that you are going to be looked to offset,
Right.
you know, and even if we can come up with some portion of it, 5,000 or 10,000, I think that would be better than saying, no, we can't come up with any of the 40,000 from our own committee. We just want to take 40,000, but we're not going to offer anything back.
Right.
But this 40,000 from ARPA, I think is, might be fit that bill of providing a offset.
and further Jesse's comments, if we take a little from everybody, how about the fair? I mean, are they willing to take their belt a bit on this and try to find anywhere else?
Well, my thought is what are we getting in return? So I know what we get from some of these other entities, and I know what we get from the fair. But I honestly haven't seen a whole lot what we're getting in return from that 25,000 that we give to the economic development. And I know they have the capacity to do a tremendous amount of fundraising. And then I'm hearing numbers like 10 or 12 or 13,000 in fundraising. So I look at it like, what are we getting from that squeeze? I'm just not seeing it. So that's why I said to come from there and as opposed to the fair. But I understand what you're saying.
So let me just jump in real quick. So here's what I'm hearing, and Mr. Duffy, you can help me. Well, I don't know where the comments are going to go. So let me say this. Our first option is going to be 40,000 from ARPA, which we have to do our work before we get there. We just can't walk in and just say, can we just use ARPA funds, and that's it. So the backup is going to be, from what I'm hearing from Mr. Betcher, and what I was thinking was, we do have a little bit of cushion that's being offered, by Hayward Lakes in terms of what budget amount that they would want. So they don't want 10, they would like 50, but 35 would be the number that was offered up by Mr. Olson, who's not on this committee, that if we came closer to his number, then that's a vote that we would possibly have. Now, if we have to cut from other areas, well, then EDC is going to be one of the options. I am not comfortable with any other entity. And if the fair wants to, I mean, if there's one unintended consequence is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So, I mean, I guess we'll have better attendance at future meetings if we start cutting people's different, requests that come to the committee. So those are things that we can consider going forward. And then some other type of, some methods. So Mr. Duffy, you probably remember this.
If the board doesn't pass this, our resolution, then do we get a second kick at the cat? I mean, we don't meet again, or do we? When do we, what's the time frame?
Well, we just need to have, we have a recommendation that we're sending to the committee. What we're going to do is, we're all going to be present at the meeting. So, I mean, now we know what we can do without having to have Sherry come up and say, well, Sherry, what about this? What about that? Putting her through the stress of public testimony and whatnot. So this is kind of like our strategy going in to speak for the entities that report to us without causing them also to freak out. So
we have to keep in mind, it's on every committee. So it'll go to finance discussion on Thursday.
Yeah.
So every committee is going to be trying to look at this. We're just bringing one suggestion, and that's from ours. But I think that, to say it's not going to pass, I think that that's
presumptive.
yeah, but I mean, that's exactly what ARPA is for. It gives also our committee and every group that we're looking at a year to say, hey, we need you to get our crap in a row because we might lose our funding for the following year. So unless we light a fire under people's behind it, I'm getting off topic. But anyway, we need to give them at least a year, not just say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're cutting. But they have to have I think we've made it very known this year that we're going to tighten our belt, but the ARPA funds are used just for that. They're not used just for broadband. They're not used just for the sheriff's department. They're used for tourism as well.
Right. So let me just offer this. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and there's only a couple faces that are still here from that exercise. This is precisely the reason why in August and in September of every year, I would ask for the committees or the entities to come in and say, what is it that you do for the county? And so it's better now than it was when it first happened, because I caused a panic. We had to have a special meeting. We were in the library, which back then when I was still actually welcome to be over there. And so we have the responsibility to speak to the entities that report before us. And that's why I make such a animated argument when it comes to the library. So the library asks for a lot of money. But what they do is it's a year-end request that comes out of nowhere, and it comes up through whatever committee that wants to take up the torch. And we should have something like this. I mean, Sherry, Ms. Beckman shows up, Ms. Beltruth shows up, Sheldon shows up, Doug even, or Don shows up. And so, sorry, between flipping the middle, first and last names, I don't like, it's a long story with that, but it's my own burden to carry, my own demon. But they make the effort to come in every month to give us an update of what they're doing. And I thought it was an odd comment that Mr. Olson had said, but they work for the advancement of the county, and we're the voice for them when it comes to the full board. Otherwise, every committee, every board would have to have everybody coming in providing this information. So we've got two tasks. One is, as a county board, pass this budget. Second, as a member of this committee, to represent the entities that take the time out of their month to come in and give us the information. And so that, I went way off topic. And so, anybody else? I know I saw a hand up from Mr. Gardner, but I also, Mr. Duffy, Mr. Betcher. Mr. Gardner.
Well, I can appreciate your deliberations. The one thing I really tracked the ARPA process. And the thing, and I'm not sure that it's, as you say, newspapers and others have done justice to what its really intent is. It is a recovery mechanism for the local governments. And as you move forward through your deliberations, the terminology that resonates in that is certainly revenue loss, where have you lost? And then what are your economic multipliers? I think that, the things you're talking about, juggling and stuff, are the economic multiplier for Sawyer County in play. Not everybody looks at it that way.
So Ms. Beckman, I have to ask you the question that every lawyer hates to ask because I don't know the answer to it. Has Hayward Lakes received any ARPA funds or CARES Act money?
Not ARPA, but CARES Act, yes.
Okay.
I have written every grant you can write.
It's both going to hurt us and help us when that argument comes up. So, all right. Any other questions on the motion? Ms. Fitch, you want to read back the motion?
It says a motion to use ARPA funds for the $40,000 to give us more planning time for next year's budget.
Okay, can we cut the last part of that sentence off? We're just asking for 40,000 for ARPA for the motion for the $40,000 deficit.
Okay.
Something like that. Should Duffy agree with that motion? Or who's motion? Who's the motion maker?
I was the motion maker, he's the
Mr.
second.
Betcher.
So do you agree with that language? I don't really need the extra stuff in there about the planning, just.
Yeah, I don't like the last, yeah, thank you.
So we'll stream that down. All right. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries. So that'll be going back to the full board at the meeting. Does it go to the full board? All right. Any other discussion on the budget?
In the event this does not pass.
Right.
Plan B is going to be, are we going to authorize you to make a second motion? Authorizing
Well,
we don't want to publish, we don't want a motion to that effect, but among us girls, is this our plan then, or will we sit there and just suck our thumb and say,
I would not like to immediately offer, well, we'll cut it down to 35,000. We know we have a little room for negotiation there, but that we can maybe offer a 5,000 reduction, not go right into 15.
I guess the question, how do we do this? We're authorizing Jim to do this? And,
well,
so-
no one needs out. Everyone's going to have equal standing when it comes to the full board. We have just I'm only chairing this committee, so there's not an additional duty unless I'm missing something. So the second thing is, and I agree with Mr. Betcher, is, clearly it's open record, right? There's a couple ways there's many ways to do this. And this is why Mr. Hoff and Mr. Kiefer like, don't put it on us. This has to be you guys to try to get this fixed. So we know that we have a motion up there for 40,000 off ARPA funds. And we know how hard the opposition is going to be to that. And also the backlash that's going to be from everyone else tipping into ARPA funds. But if you think about it this way, does a motion like that, because that requires fiscal, is that a 2/3 vote?
No, it'll be, anything you do at the county board meeting next Tuesday will be to balance the budget, and that takes just a majority vote at that time. So once the budget is passed, any amendments throughout the year after that is when you get into the 2/3 vote then.
So we have 15 board members, and so everyone grabbed one more person, was able to win one more person on a vote, 10 votes. So
it's called a walking quorum.
Well, no, just talk to one other person.
One person.
Email,
Talk to one
because your
person.
email will spark the crack in the earth and all that.
And I think there is going to be some opposition because they see this massive ARPA pile of money and everybody wants them. They're like, but not everybody is entitled to it for all of their different programs, but we have a motion to get 40,000 for a program that it's actually authorized for. So I mean, there might be some pushback, but I mean, I think it has a good chance of being approved.
It'll be the same pushback as broadband cut. And that's the same exact, or the heat scanner, the body scanner at the sheriff's department. Those things were approved. That's what we use the funds for. This is no different in my mind.
Okay.
I have a phone call that I have to take for work at, so.
No, we're gonna finish up here real quick. So is there any more discussion on the budget? All right. Same. 6:30 Tuesday. Come check it out, see what we got going on. Number 14, Historical Society update.
Should I remove that from the template going
Yeah,
forward?
that's 15, future agenda items. Anything we want to talk about for next month?
That one's in the budget next year. Thank you.
We got number 16, reports, correspondence, other matters for discussion only. The record reflect that Ms. Hessel departed in a hurry with a parting comment at 9:30. Nothing for number 16. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.